December 28, 2023. 3 days after Christmas, police responded to a 911 call, sending them to the most affluent neighborhood in Dover, Massachusetts. Inside the $4 million mansion, on the kitchen counter lay a note and a set of house keys. In the note, there were instructions for whoever found it to call the police and that authorities should check the 3 bedrooms on the second floor of the magnificent home. On each of the 3 rooms' doors was a white sheet of paper to mark the ones which needed to be looked into. And sure enough, when police checked, inside each room was a body. One contained 54-year-old Tina Kamal. In another room was her husband Rakesh, 57. And in yet another room was Ariana, their 18-year-old daughter. Tina and Ariana were killed in their beds by a single gunshot to the head, while Rakesh was inside a bathtub with a similar wound. The gun was still in his hand. Apparently, by the looks of things, Rakesh had killed his wife and daughter in their sleep before turning the gun on himself. How could Rakesh, who'd crafted this seemingly perfect family that lived the perfect life, do such a terrible thing? Let's find out about the web of lies that led to this, shall we? Let's get into it. The family were as picture perfect as anyone could hope for. The Kamals were quite literally living the American dream. Rakesh, or Rick as everyone called him, was born in the United States to parents who migrated from India. Rick possessed both the deeply traditional values from his Indian heritage as well as that thirst for success that very few people in the world possess. He studied engineering at Stanford, MIT, and Boston University and immediately stepped into a high-paying job right out of university. So it came as a bit of a surprise when he approached his parents to discuss an arranged marriage. In every other way, Rick had modeled his life after everything American, his dreams of being successful, wealthy, and even down to the Americanized name he went by. This is a very important aspect of Rick that you need to understand. Everything about him and what the world perceived of him was crafted to impress, from his car to his shoes to his academic prestige. Rick was the epitome of, well, everything everyone dreams of achieving, and he crafted that image with attentive precision. It was, in many ways, the center of his being. The marriage was set up, and within 2 weeks of meeting Tina, they were married. Rick said the moment they met, he knew that she was the one for him. At the time, she was a student at Delhi University, and she transferred to Harvard when she moved to the United States with her new husband. Smart, beautiful, and just as academically inclined as Rick, they were a perfect match. Rick worked at an investment firm while his wife finished her studies, and she joined him at the firm once she graduated, working there from the late 80s all the way to 2009. Rick left the company a few years before his wife did to become the chief technology officer at Harvard Business School online. Well, this was the story that they told everyone at least, and it was the one that they used in most of Rick's later business ventures. Notice that the vague term engineering got thrown around there. Not to mention 3 of the country's best universities. Rick was extremely vague about what field of engineering he studied, and there are dozens, probably closer to hundreds of various engineering fields a person can get into. Yet, there's no record of any official certification to prove that he ever finished any of the courses he took. He was definitely enrolled at those universities, but good luck finding any record of him actually finishing any degrees. The same goes for Tina. There is no record of her studying at Harvard at all. Whatever the case was, the couple were happy both in their marriage and their respective fields and were pulling in huge salaries. As far as any of their colleagues through the years were concerned, they were model employees, very efficient and pleasant people to work with. Given their deep devotion to their careers, they never wanted children. But something changed for them in the early 2000s. They decided to try for at least one baby. In 2005 came their daughter Ariana. And if their lives weren't perfect enough already, this kid was a prodigy. Not kidding. She could speak, read, and write by the age of 2. By the time she graduated from the prestigious prep school Milton Academy, Ariana sang opera, wrote award-winning poetry pieces, and universities in the STEM fields were fighting for her to attend their schools. In the end, Ariana applied to Middlebury College to study neuroscience. In 2019, everything changed though. Everything in Rick's life was crafted around his appearance. Everything. The suits, the cars, and even the perfect family. When he decided to upgrade both his job and his house in the same year, Rick bit off more than he could chew. First, he bought that $4 million mansion in Dover, Massachusetts, and he and Tina started a company called Edunova a few years before, and Rick decided it was time to throw himself into the venture completely. Edunova was an education technology company focused on improving student performance by offering tools and strategies for academic achievement, time management, and study skills. Rick relied heavily on his incredibly gifted daughter to give his program credence. And I can give Rick this much at least. He and Tina devoted a great deal of their time, resources, and attention to getting her into the right schools that could challenge Ariana's brilliant mind appropriately. She was well loved by her friends, very much respected by her tutors, and in every way a well-rounded young woman with boatloads of potential. From the get-go, Edunova struggled financially and never managed to gain traction in the already oversaturated ed tech market. Not that Rick would ever admit that to the outside world, especially not now that he just bought a $4 million mansion in Dover, the wealthiest neighborhood in Massachusetts. Only one hiccup here. Rick never told Tina that he'd been fired from Harvard Business School online. Why he'd been fired, they've never disclosed, but Rick made it seem like he was still working for them so that the jump into Edunova didn't seem like such a big gamble. That's why Tina offered to quit her own job to dedicate as much time as possible into it. For 2 years, Rick struggled to get Edunova the traction it needed to grow. He appeared on talk shows and did the rounds on the media circuit, but the company just couldn't compete, especially once other major academic institutions started questioning Tina and Rick's academic certifications. And all of this was under the guise that they were still living off Rick's salary that he in truth did not have. The company was dissolved by the state in December 2021 for failing to file annual reports. Tina bounced back relatively quickly, snagging a position at the American Red Cross of Massachusetts as a board member, while Rick took out a $750,000 loan to start Cambetus, another startup using the same premise. And get this, he used his own mother's house as collateral on the loan. Hey, desperate times call for desperate measures, like desperate enough to throw your own elderly mother under the bus. Am I right? Now, he had 2 massive loans, one on a company that already went under, and another on a new venture that had doom spelled in its cards too. Not to mention a $4 million home that he still owed $3.7 million on. Instead of downsizing on their lavish lifestyle, Rick put in even more time and effort into Cambetus, hell-bent on making it work, without anyone ever knowing that the cars and the mansion and the maids and the suits were on borrowed time. To buy some time from debt collectors, Rick sold their second home for $800,000, but that was only enough to keep them at bay for a few months. Rick still owed on both loans, their cars and their $4 million mansion. By 2021, Rick was sinking in debt while his wife and daughter still believed that they were rolling in money. Hell, he even put in an offer for a $16 million home in Tennessee. As you can probably tell by now, Rick's dream of living it up had long since surpassed his financial reality. Now that he'd already taken out a loan on his mother's house and filed bankruptcy for one business under his own name, he had no one else to financially shift the blame to except his own wife. He falsified documents and filed bankruptcy in Tina's name without her knowledge while she shopped for furniture for the new mansion in Tennessee, completely oblivious to what was going on in their bank accounts. And he started borrowing money from family, old colleagues, and acquaintances under the pretenses that they were funding new business ventures. When these friends started calling to find out when he was going to pay them back, Rick posed as Tina through emails, spinning a wild lie that he'd been in China for business, fallen ill, and that he was hospitalized somewhere in Asia. After a few weeks, Rick, again posing as Tina, let them know that he was stable enough to be transferred back to the United States and was currently in hospital in Boston, barely alive. So the family that he could throw under the bus had run out, and now the running had begun. By November 2023, Rick started to falsify financial documents to put in an offer on the Tennessee mansion and delayed the purchase by telling the real estate agent that he was in China for business. By Christmas of that year, Tina had planned a grand Christmas for what she thought was her happy, thriving family, while Rick knew full well that there was an eviction notice dated for December the 28th, and a few days after that, as soon as the new year broke, around $10 million of debt and all the lies he'd spun were going to come crashing down on him. Once the house was foreclosed on, and the real estate company found out that his financial records were fake, his made-up deadly illness was going to come to the surface too. Tina was going to find out that they owed more than they had in property, that he'd taken out loans on his own mother's house and committed dozens of counts of fraud in Tina's name. He had only a few weeks before this entire house of cards crashed around them all. He gave his wife and daughter one more blissful Christmas. The 28th loomed over the gorgeous estate like a shadow for him. So on the 26th, knowing that the eviction squad was going to arrive in 2 days, Rick told family and Ariana's boyfriend that they'd all fallen ill from some bad shrimp so that they wouldn't come visit. Ariana's boyfriend was planning on spending the day with the family to drop off Ariana's Christmas present. He also arranged with the bank that he'd leave the keys on the kitchen counter and that he and his family would have evacuated the property willingly, leaving them free to take possession of the house. At 4 that afternoon, all communication from Rick, Tina, and Ariana stopped. On the 28th, the realtor arrived to pick up the keys, but the alarm was blaring and no one answered the door, so he left, deciding that he'd handle this foreclosure in the new year. Later that same day, Rick's brother, Minaj Kamal, arrived. He was worried after Rick had let them all know that the family was sick, and since Rick hadn't updated them on their condition, he thought he'd check up on them. Using a spare set of keys, he walked into the house and the alarms were still going off. Minaj found the note and keys on the counter. The note explained that 3 of the rooms on the second floor were marked with white sheets of paper and that whoever found this note was not to go into any of those rooms. Instead, they needed to call the authorities immediately. Confused, Minaj went off to the second floor to find his brother. But all of the doors were closed, and as the note described, 3 bedrooms were marked with plain white sheets of paper taken from the same copy machine that was used to print the note on. Minaj went into the room closest to him. Inside, he found Ariana lying on her bed under a plain sheet that covered her body. She'd been shot point blank in the head. Minaj didn't bother going to the other rooms. He called 911, and the ambulance found him in the driveway, hysterical. Rakesh might have meant for the real estate agent to find the bodies, but he'd underestimated how much his family cared for them. And in doing so, he nearly destroyed Minaj's life too. He's never recovered from finding his niece in that way. Police found Ariana in her room and Tina in the master bedroom, also in bed with a sheet covering her body. In a spare bedroom at the end of the hall, Rick had lowered himself into a bathtub and shot himself in the head too. In the backyard, in a pond, they found the family's cell phones and laptops submerged underwater. As for the firearm in Rick's hand, they still haven't been able to find out where he'd gotten it. His name was Rakesh Kamal. Let's just call him by his full name and not the stupid made-up name he chose for himself, because that's what his entire life was. A make-believe facade based on everything that was important to him. Money, trinkets, and outward appearances. Please don't misunderstand me. I have empathy for those who suffer so much that they take their own lives. I would never speak ill of those in the throes of mental turmoil, so deep that they cannot see a way out other than death. But that is not what Rakesh was. He valued the image more than he did his wife's life. A wife who'd only ever loved their family and whose identity he abused repeatedly to obscure his own web of lies. He loved his cars and his suits more than he did his brilliant, infinitely kind, and creative daughter, who would have gone on to live a long and successful life with or without Rakesh and his debt. Here's the worst thing of it all. In the event of Rakesh and Tina's deaths, Ariana would have received a life insurance policy that would have paid for her tuition and still left her with enough to be a millionaire. But Rakesh didn't allow his daughter and wife to live. He decided that they were part of his lie, part of the false world he'd built. To him, they were the same as his mansions and his failed businesses. They weren't human. They were just another part of the grand masquerade. We can discuss the psychology of financial ruin all we want, but it won't change the fact that Rakesh is a murderer. He killed Tina and Ariana in cold blood. Had he taken his own life and left it at that, I would have defended him. But he did not, and I cannot side with a murderer. But this should be a cautionary tale for all of us. The lies we see on social media of perfect lives, travels, and picture-perfect families, that's all it is, lies. Do not place your entire life on trinkets and things. Everything in your house, your bank account, and property that's in your name is temporary. Money is made to be spent, and physical items lose value the moment you purchase them. Houses are dependent on a market that's never stable, and clothes go out of fashion. But human lives, their impact on the world and their potential, well, they only rise in value. Spend time with the people you love, because the world and all of its temporary things aren't going to give you anything in return. Rakesh is just one of many who are willing to put their own families on the line, all for the sake of living a life based on monetary values that we've been conditioned to believe is the only life worth living. Don't be that person that values image more than the people who make life worth living. Or am I wrong? Maybe I'm being too harsh. I don't think I am. But you know me. I'd rather hear what you think. You know the drill. Drop a comment, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, people.